The sky churned violently, clouds swirling like angry spirits, and the waves grew monstrous, tossing the small cruise ship like a toy. It was supposed to be a simple getaway, a weekend escape to celebrate the retirement of Captain Michael Adams, but fate had other plans. As the ship groaned and cracked under the assault of the storm, passengers were flung into the dark, churning ocean. Michael, a seasoned sailor, had seen countless storms, but nothing like this. The rain felt like needles against his skin, and the howling wind drowned out the screams of passengers. He managed to grab a life raft, and with sheer will pulled himself aboard. In the chaos, he saw a few others clinging desperately to pieces of debris. Sarah, a young journalist chasing adventure, Dr. Allen, a quiet man in his 50s who kept to himself, Mark and Rachel, newlyweds who had joined the cruise on a whim, and Carlos, a mechanic with a rough demeanor but a heart of gold. They drifted for hours, losing track of time as exhaustion set in. Just when all hope seemed lost, the storm broke, and the morning sun revealed a looming silhouette on the horizon. A small, uncharted island covered in dense jungle. It was a glimmer of hope, but as they paddled toward the shore, an unsettling feeling took hold of each of them. The island was eerily silent, as if it had been waiting for them. The group staggered onto the beach, soaked and exhausted, yet grateful to be alive. But the sense of relief was short-lived. The island's air was heavy, silence almost deafening. Sarah, ever the observer, noted that there were no birds, no animals, just the endless hum of the jungle. The trees towered over them like ancient sentinels, their twisted branches resembling skeletal hands reaching out from the earth. "We need to find shelter," Michael said, his voice cutting through the uneasy quiet. He led the way, and the group followed, trudging through the thick sand and into the shadowy forest. As they ventured deeper, the foliage grew denser, blocking out the sun and casting the jungle in a perpetual twilight. Carlos scouted ahead, and it wasn't long before he stumbled upon something unusual, a crumbling stone structure hidden beneath vines and moss. It looked old, far older than anything that should have been on an uncharted island. "What is this place?" Rachel whispered, her voice tinged with a mix of fear and fascination. Michael inspected the structure, his fingers tracing strange symbols carved into the stone. "We're not alone," he said grimly. The chill ran down his spine. Someone was here before us. The group set up camp near the ancient ruins, using what little supplies they had salvaged. As night fell, a thick fog rolled in, swallowing the island in a heavy, oppressive blanket. The jungle came alive with unsettling sounds, branches snapping, whispers carried on the wind, and faint, distant footsteps that never seemed to get closer. Sarah sat by the fire, scribbling notes in her journal, trying to document their ordeal. She had a habit of finding stories in places no one else dared look. This place felt different. It was as if the island itself was a living thing, watching them with unseen eyes. She glanced at Michael, who was staring intently into the darkness beyond their camp. "Do you think there are others here?" she asked. Michael hesitated. "I don't know, but something doesn't feel right." Carlos and Dr. Allen had ventured back to the ruins earlier, hoping to find clues about the island's history. They returned with grim expressions, carrying old, rusted equipment and fragments of documents written in a language none of them recognized. The items were clearly decades old, remnants of some forgotten past. "What is this stuff?" Mark asked, inspecting a rusted metal device that looked like a cross between a syringe and a weapon. "Medical equipment, I think," Dr. Allen replied, his voice unsteady. "Or something close to it." Sarah leafed through the yellowed pages they had found, her eyes narrowing at the bizarre illustrations. Human figures with elongated limbs, strange symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and diagrams that looked like blueprints for some kind of twisted experiment. "These are not just medical notes," she said, her voice laced with dread. This looks like experimentation. Human experimentation." The realization hit them all at once. This was no ordinary island. It was a place of nightmares, where unspeakable things had been done. As they sat in uneasy silence, they could feel the weight of those past horrors pressing down on them. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the jungle. Everyone froze, straining to see through the fog. But whatever, or whoever, was out there remained hidden. "We need to keep watch," Michael said, his voice tense. "Whatever happened here, it's not over." Morning came slowly, the sun struggling to break through the thick canopy. The group decided to explore the ruins further, hoping to find something, anything, that would help them understand the island's dark history. But the deeper they went, the more they felt they were being watched. As they moved through the dense jungle, the ruins became more elaborate, with tunnels leading underground and structures that looked like abandoned laboratory. Sarah found more documents scattered around, each more disturbing than the last. One page detailed the procedures of a Project Echo, an experiment involving genetic manipulation on human subjects. The words were clinical, detached, and devoid of any hint of humanity. This place was a lab, Sarah concluded, her voice barely a whisper. They were doing things to people here. Mark and Rachel stuck close together, their earlier sense of adventure replaced by creeping dread. They had only been married a few months, and now they were trapped on a nightmare island with no way out. As they rounded a corner, Mark noticed something strange, a series of cages, large enough to hold a person. Some were rusted and broken, while others remained intact, their metal bars twisted and scarred. "This can't be real," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "Who would do something like this?" But before anyone could respond, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the jungle. The group rushed back to camp, only to find it in disarray. Supplies were scattered, fire had been extinguished, and Dr. Allen was missing. His belongings were still there, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. "Dr. Allen," Michael called, but the only response was the oppressive silence of the jungle. They searched the area frantically, found nothing except more questions. The realization sank in. Whatever was on this island had taken him. They returned to camp, shaken and unsure of their next move. Michael took charge, trying to keep everyone calm, but it was clear that fear was spreading. They were being hunted by something they couldn't see, and now one of them was gone. As night fell, they huddled close together, every shadow and sound becoming a potential threat. Sarah stared into the darkness, clutching her journal like a talisman. She could feel the island's secrets closing in around them, and the weight of Dr. Allen's disappearance hung heavy in the air. It was only the beginning, and deep down, they all knew it. With the sun barely peeking through the dense canopy, the group decided to confront the growing mystery head-on. They couldn't afford to wait passively while more of them disappeared. Driven by fear and desperation, they returned to the ruins, determined to find answers, or at least some trace of Dr. Allen. Arlos led the way, his mechanic's instincts guiding him as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the underground structure they had found the day before. The walls were lined with rusty pipes and faded warning signs, and the air was thick, the smell of decay. They finally reached a large, reinforced door, looked more intact than the others. Carlos fiddled with the mechanisms, and with a reluctant groan, the door swung open, revealing a chilling sight. Rows of glass chambers filled the room, each one containing the mummified remains of people, men, women, and children, preserved in varying states of transformation. Their bodies were contorted, limbs unnaturally elongated or fused, faces twisted in eternal expressions of agony. This was the heart of the island's dark secret, a place where the experiments had been conducted. Sarah covered her mouth, fighting back the urge to scream. They were experimenting on them, changing them into something else. Michael walked among the chambers, his heart pounding. He stopped in front of a chamber that was different from the rest, larger, with reinforced glass and a complex array of machinery attached. Inside was a figure unlike any of the others. It was humanoid but grotesquely altered, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. The creature's appearance was unnervingly familiar, and when it moved, a low growl filled the room. "Is that?" Mark stuttered, stepping back in horror. Michael clenched his fists. "That's Dr. Allen." The realization hit them like a punch to the gut. The island's experiments were not just a thing of the past. They were still happening, and now, one of their own had become a part of it. The group fled from the lab, their minds reeling from what they had seen. There was no way off the island, no way to escape the horrors lurking in the shadows. The jungle seemed to close in around them, and every sound was a reminder that they were not alone. Sarah's journal became more frantic as she tried to piece together fragmented history of the island. The documents they had found spoke of a project designed to create a new form of life, humans enhanced with animal traits, capable of surviving any environment. But the experiments had gone horribly wrong, leading to uncontrollable mutations and madness. The scientists had abandoned the island, leaving their failed creations behind. Michael, Sarah, Mark, Rachel, and Carlos sat around the dying campfire, the weight of their situation hanging heavily over them. They knew they had to find a way to stop whatever was continuing the experiments. But how do you fight something that defies reason? You think we can reverse what happened to Dr. Allen? Rachel asked, voice tinged with desperation. Michael shook his head. I don't know, but we have to try. You can't leave him like that. They devised a plan to return to the lab and disable the equipment. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance to put an end to the island's twisted legacy. As they prepared to make their move, the fog thickened once again, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the trees. Carlos, armed with a makeshift weapon, led the way. But as they neared the ruins, they were ambushed. Figures emerged from the fog. Creatures that were once human, but now grotesque amalgamations of flesh and bone. They moved with terrifying speed, their eyes glowing with a cold, predatory intelligence. The group fought desperately, but they were outnumbered. In the chaos, Carlos was dragged into the darkness, his screams piercing the night. Michael, Sarah, Mark, and Rachel managed to break free, retreating back to the beach, their hearts pounding in their chests. They were running out of time, and the island was closing in on them. With only 4 of them left, hope was slipping away. But Michael was determined not to let the island claim any more lives. They regrouped at the camp, and Sarah went through her notes one last time, searching for something they had missed. That's when she found it. A hidden reference in the documents to a fail-safe mechanism. The scientists had created a way to shut down the experiments remotely, but it required access to the main control panel deep within the lab. With renewed determination, they made their way back to the underground facility, avoiding the creatures that roamed the island. They reached the control room, but the failsafe was buried under layers of complex codes and rusted machinery. Mark and Michael worked frantically to bypass the security, while Sarah and Rachel watched. Just as they activated the shutdown sequence, the creatures descended upon them. Michael fought them off with every ounce of strength he had, buying just enough time for the failsafe to engage. The lights flickered, and the machinery sputtered to a halt. The creatures collapsed, their twisted forms reverting to lifeless husks. Exhausted and bloodied, the survivors stumbled out of the lab as the sun began to rise. The island was quiet once more, the nightmares buried beneath the ruins, but the scars would remain forever etched in their minds. They gathered on the beach, looking out at the horizon. There was no celebration, no relief, only the heavy weight of what they had witnessed and the haunting knowledge that they were part of the island's dark legacy. Michael turned to the others, his voice heavy with resolve. We survived. But this place, it's not just an island. It's a warning. The group silently nodded, their bond forged in the fires of their shared nightmare. They had faced the island's secrets and lived to tell the tale. But deep down, they knew that some secrets were never meant to be uncovered, and some horrors could never be escaped.